Well, we wait just a couple more minutes. Probably start at 2:05 or 3:05, depending on what your time zone is. Um, or sorry, not 3:05, 5:05. If everyone wouldn't mind just chiming in on the chat where you're joining from. I know we have a lot of I saw a lot of registrations from the Bay Area, but would be curious just to see, who's in this meeting. Nice. See Bay Area, California. Ooh, New Jersey. Yes. East Coast representation. Love it. My partner and I we just moved to Brooklyn a year and a half ago. We're both from California, but we're New York transplants now, and we love it. Seymour Bay Area, East Bay, nice, cool. Um, good thing. A lot of my examples that I chose for the webinar is relevant to the Bay Area. So cool. Nice. Yeah, so my partner and I were in New York. We're actually in the Bay Area for the next week. So visiting some friends and definitely enjoying the weather out here. Miss it a lot for sure. All right. Cool. So I think we have a pretty good number. So I'm thinking we can get started. Just want to give a heads up that I am recording this meeting just, to share in the future in terms of for maybe parents that registered or students that weren't able to attend. Just a heads up, for anyone that feel free to go camera on, camera off, whatever you're comfortable with. And throughout this webinar, feel free to just chime in on the chat if you have questions. We're going to have time at the end for questions. So with that, I'm going to go full screen. And well, welcome everyone. My name is Feiyang. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more formally and thoroughly a few slides in. But I am the founder of Your Epic Consulting, which is a college admissions coaching business that I've been doing this work for a few years now. But formally last year decided to venture into the solo entrepreneur space and start this business formally. And if you're here, I probably already know that this is a essay workshop specifically tailored for the Why Us essay, which is a lot of schools, especially on the Common App, do require a hey, why are you specifically interested in our school? So hopefully this can provide some good information and be of help for either if you're a student or parent of a student that is applying. So who am I? As I mentioned, my name is Feiyang. You can call me Fei for short. A little bit about my background. My family's from Davis, California. So not quite the Bay Area, but pretty close. A little car ride away. I went to UCLA for my undergrad and then ended up getting my master's in education at USC. And for my professional experience, I actually worked at UC Berkeley, working in admissions as well as student services. And specifically and most relevantly to what we'll be talking about today, I worked at the UC Berkeley Admissions Office, where I reviewed thousands of applications between 2021 to 2023. And what that was a really, really awesome experience. It gave me a lot of insight in terms of the type of competitive applicants that were applying to schools like a UC Berkeley and similar. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in detail, but my approach and my philosophy, if I were to sum it up in one sentence, is I coach students to avoid quote unquote college pleasing and instead showcase their authenticity and specifically through storytelling. And a little bit more on this as we go forward. So, where does this whole college pleasing concept come from? And maybe some of you are familiar. Maybe this is some of you hearing this for the first time. But College pleasing is actually something that I kind of came up with and recognizing from my own story. I was a huge people pleaser all throughout my life. And I realized in high school when I was applying to college, I was actually doing the same thing for colleges. So then as I was figuring out my story, I started calling it, oh, this is college pleasing. And what does that mean, right? It's doing activities to look good for colleges, specifically, thinking about like a school like UCLA. I imagine that UCLA wants me to be this big leader, right? Someone who just really has so much influence, has so much is leading a large team, is almost like a politician to a degree. So I did that for a club called Key Club. I was lieutenant governor, oversaw like 7 different schools, but this political act and being this almost like this figurehead, yes, it looked impressive for the college apps, but it was also draining and unfulfilling, especially because I am someone who really thrives on meaningful one-on-one connections, meaningful conversations. Sorry, someone might not be muted. Can you please make sure you're muting yourself? Um, okay, sorry about that. Going back. So, one, again, draining and unfulfilling. And I know some might say, oh, it worked, right? You got into UCLA. True, sometimes college pleasing works, right? But at the time, my number one school was actually UC Berkeley. So even though I had the grades, I had the test scores, I think there was an element of my story that was missing that authenticity, and it was not as compelling as it could have been. So college pleasing continued. I got to UCLA, and it actually followed me there too, right? I chose UCLA for its prestige. And as soon as I got there, I felt so lost, not just academically, but socially. As many of us know, maybe having applied to college or attended college, there's a ton of influence. You can be pulled in 10, 20 different directions. And without knowing who you are and the reasons why you do what you do, it's easy to be influenced and it's easy to lose sight of what's important to you. And this is in the form of like following the career directions and paths of those around me, which is really tough, right? I would spend an entire year trying 10 different things and then kind of feel like, man, I don't feel like I really got anywhere. So this brings me to kind of sharing my why, and it actually relates to how I approach today's webinar and kind of our what we'll be discussing today. I founded Europe Consulting because I relate with the student journey and the pressures that a lot of students, particularly, I think are. Just a reminder, please make sure you're muted. If you haven't already, thank you. Okay, there we go. Probably should have done that in the first place. Cool. So for my journey, I want to make sure that when I founded Europe Consulting, I want to make sure that I can help students walk a less challenging path. And it's always going to be difficult figuring out who you are and what's important to you. But the earlier you start wondering and earlier you start exploring these questions, I think the better you are. It'll serve you the rest of your life, not just applying to college, but how you show up in college, how you show up in work post-college. And one thing, and hopefully you just kind of see this throughout this webinar, one thing that separates me from other college coaches is while other coaches might help students just write better essays, I actually help students tell better stories. And part of that relates to that authenticity and their why, and helping them discover their own reasons for wanting to apply to a school, wanting to apply for a major. And then just at the bottom, a little credential stuff. Past students I've worked with have gone to schools such as a UC Berkeley, as a Cornell, like UCLA, et cetera. And you'll see some of those examples. I actually pull some specific examples from past students throughout this webinar. So what you see here are an example of some different types of why us essay prompts. You can see it can be as like short and generic as like, why are you interested in this major? But some are a little bit more specific. For example, you see here, like for Stanford, please describe what aspects of your life experience, interests, and character would you make a distinctive contribution as an undergraduate to Stanford University? And then others are even a little bit more comprehensive. You look down here at the bottom right for Northwestern. Now you're talking about specific aspects of your background or community, right? But what all of these prompts have in common, and even though they may look different, is they're all interested in not just you as the applicant and sharing your story, and also not just sharing about the school. It's looking for both. It's looking for that connection, and your essay and your narrative should present both, and then connect the dots, which we'll talk more about going forward. But just sharing this to see what these different prompts can look like. And why is this important? Why is there a why us essay in the first place? Well, as some of you may know, you can see on the right, November 1st. For any seniors that are applying this year, well, if you don't know that November 1st is the early action or decision deadline, well, now you know. That is a really big deadline for colleges. And the reason is a lot of them will fill a majority or at least a significant percentage of their class through these early rounds. Why is that? Well, for early action, while it's not binding, you get a lot of signal that you're this student's number one choice. And if admitted, they're most likely going to come to you. And decision is binding. So legally, students are contractually obligated to attend. So schools know that by admitting this student, they will for sure enroll. And so that's where the why us essay kind of comes in, and showing what we call demonstrated interest. That's what admissions officers basically it represents how committed a student is to attending your school, right? And so that's signal through the essay, why a student's motivated, and it gives you signal to try to understand, okay, it's clear that the student has done the research. It's clear that, the student has knows exactly, why they're coming here. And, so it gives the school confidence that, hey, if we admit this student, we know exactly how they're going to contribute. We know exactly what kind of student they're going to be once they're on our campus, which relates to their future vision of what they're going to be at the school. Because one of the most challenging parts, as I've experienced as an admissions officer, is like you're predicting the student's potential, which is very hard, right? It's obviously a very inexact science, but what can really help is when a student can communicate not just what they've done, right, but include their character and their values, right? Because while you can do a bunch of different things at any given time, your values are pretty consistent. Your character is pretty consistent. And that'll follow you from high school to college. So what are some key components? Obviously, there's a lot that goes into an essay, but I want to try to really focus on these three main areas. So one is clear growth over time. And I call this, it's a combination of introspection as well as showing versus telling. And I know that gets thrown around a lot, like, probably sounds familiar. Oh, make sure you show, make sure, don't just tell. That it kind of loses its meaning a little bit. So what I'll show in just show in just a bit is that specific examples of what is considered, like telling, and what is more compelling showing. So more on that in a second. Second is intentional and specific research into a school and beyond the surface. And what I mean by that is, if students are just regurgitating marketing brochures or website or fun facts about schools, yeah, it's true. But you're not telling the admissions officer anything they don't already know. And frankly, they haven't, they probably have memorized that already, right? They know that UC Berkeley is attractive for XYZ reason. They know that Stanford is attractive for XYZ reason, but they want to know beneath the surface. So we'll talk more about that as well. And then finally, connecting the two, right? Like your story and then what you find interesting about the school, and then drawing that connection. I call it the so what. How does your story relate to how you will show up on campus? So show, don't tell. What does this kind of include? Well, one, you're not just describing what happened in your life. This is what students do a lot, actually, just provide a recap. I did this, then I did this, then I did this. Well, yeah, that's true, right? But why does that matter? And so a key part of showing is it includes what beyond just what just happened, it includes, say, thoughts. This happened, and then this is in the moment, this is what I thought, right? Or feelings, setbacks, and reflections. Like, maybe this happened 3 years ago, but now when you look back, how do you feel about now? Do you feel the same? Has your feeling changed? And if so, how? Um, and then finally, it can help, as you'll see in the example that I'll share in just a second, is to think back, if you're a student, to how you actually experienced events. You don't just wake up and, oh, I realized that, I want to go to med school. In fact, if that is written in an essay, I'm as an admissions reader, I'm a little skeptical. I don't think life happens where you just wake up and you magically decide, okay, I'm going to dedicate my entire life to go into med school. There's more of a process. There's more of a unfolding, slow realization, a lot of factors, and you want your essay to represent that. Okay, so I'm going to show a couple of examples here. So example A is honestly, this is a lot of what students will write about during, I say tennis here, could be anything. During this activity, I realized this. Okay, cool. And I bold the word realized here because for any students out there, you really should avoid this word at all costs. Life doesn't, like I mentioned, um, life doesn't happen like that, right? You just don't wake up and realize something profound. So whenever you see realize, that's a great warning sign that there's something deeper here and you should dig further. So I know this is a lot, so we're going to break it down into the components of this like second example. So first of all, you have this part. The ball hit the net with a disappointing thud. I adjusted my stance, tossing the ball higher, feeling tension in my shoulders and mind. So remember we talked about how like oftentimes showing, there's this feeling aspect. You're actually experiencing it, right? So for this student, the example is you see the ball, have this not go over. So what you do, you adjust your stance, you try to, toss the ball higher. Probably a coach told you that at some point. So for us as a reader, and I feel like I'm there, right? Like I feel like I'm in the crowd, like watching this student make these adjustments in real time. Okay. And then now, remember what we talked about, the thoughts that go into it, because we're all human and none of us like to fail, right? And when we fail, we to some extent we're a little scared or hesitant. We don't want to fail again, right? So here the student reminds himself, hey, I've missed a lot of serves, but just because I've missed serves in the past doesn't mean I'm going to miss it again. I can learn from it and I can get better, which is a very important lesson in resilience, right? So this is where a little bit more of that context happens, right? Like coming in, this lesson of resilience and the student reminding themselves that, hey, they actually succeeded in the past. They won league championship through this persistence, in spite of these times that they might have failed. that they might have struggled with whatever it is related to tennis. And then going through pride in my journey surged through me. I regained the confidence to follow my coach's advice, focus on the follow through. And, this is, they could have easily, in example A, they could have just also said, I realized my serve needed improvement. So I followed my coach's advice, focus on the follow through. Yes, again, that's more of an example of telling, but here, like just in the context of everything and adding in the thoughts and adding in the feeling, it just feels so much more realistic and so much more compelling. And then finally, to wrap things up at the end, this time the ball sailed over the net, reminding me that tennis is more than just technique. It's about self-compassion and trusting all that I've built within myself. And so I love this part so much. It's a beautiful, like bring things full circle, right? Because oftentimes what we do isn't actually like what we're actually doing, right? Or I'm going to rephrase that. What we're doing isn't actually the impact of what we did. So yes, it is tennis. Yes, it is a match. It is a point, but it's also something more. It's something deeper. It's about this student learning through tennis how to be more self-compassionate, especially in an individual sport where if you fail, you have no one to blame except yourself. So a lot of times it's easy to be super hard on yourself. I can't do anything right, like, hey, maybe I should just quit. Like, what's the use? But it's through tennis and through these adjustments and, not just technique, but also just like changing that language and how the student talked to themselves, that they built up this self-compassion and trust. So for those reasons, obviously, example B, I think is a really, really great example of what it means to show, not just tell the admissions officer what happened. So the next area we'll cover is what specific school research might look like. And what goes into that? Well, one, research into the school should be unique and distinct to that school. And, as much as possible, not any other school. And this is where you to a certain extent, you just have to do the research and you have to dig far enough. Because at the surface level, yeah, a lot of schools are going to look unique. Most majors, you can find some type of that major at most schools, especially the highly impacted ones, the most popular ones. Most schools will have this, CS degree, have an engineering school. Most schools will have the typical STEM degrees. They'll have poli-sci, they'll have political science, they'll have, say, psychology, some of the most popular majors. And a lot of the student services or a lot of the, especially in a given area, a lot of schools will be very similar in those regards. So you want to look beneath the surface because you don't want to say something that could honestly be copy and pasted and applied to hundreds or even thousands of other colleges. So if you find that most of your essay is based off of facts that, can be found on a website or found on, especially the homepage of the school website, I encourage you to really dig deeper. And I'll show you what that looks like from here. So this is actually a very common reason for a lot of students. They'll say, I want to attend Stanford. I say Stanford here, but honestly, it could be any school. It could be Harvard, it could be Cornell, it could be Duke, Brown, Amherst, et cetera, et cetera. But it could be, I want to attend this school because I'm excited for all of the amazing professors I will learn from, which will allow me to solve society's biggest challenges. Funny enough, I had a webinar with one of my friends who's current Berkeley Admissions Officer at UC Berkeley. And he and I both agreed, like, hey, any given year, we probably read thousands of like this variation of this sentence. Because it's kind of assumed, right? I think all of us here, either we've attended or our students are looking to attend competitive schools. Obviously, we and our students have big ambitions. We want to solve society's greatest problems. We want to learn. That's assumed. So if that's the big takeaway from your why us essay, I would argue, that's not deep enough. That's pretty generic and pretty surface level. And you need to dig deeper to get more specific. So example B, this is a little bit better, I would say. So I'm excited to attend Stanford because I've always dreamed about working in software engineering at a tech company, and the school is located right in the middle of Silicon Valley. Yeah, true. I believe it. I honestly, I think a lot of applicants to Stanford feel the same way. You can't argue that it is located in the middle of Silicon Valley. And yes, if you attend Stanford, if admitted, you have a great chance at landing an awesome, engineering role, right, at one of these tech companies. But just something to keep in mind, like most students are going to say that or some version of that, right? And Stanford knows that, and they have it on their marketing brochure. It's like located in the heart of Silicon Valley, Stanford University. Here are our partners, Google, Apple, Microsoft, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, again, surface level. That's a little better. It's a little bit more specific. Now I know that, hey, this student wants to go into engineering. Okay, cool. But so do, tens or hundreds of thousands of other applicants. So now, okay, we're looking at this third example here. And let's break it down a little bit more. So starting with this first sentence, as I pursue my passion for technology, I'm drawn to Stanford's unique resources and its close ties to Silicon Valley. Yeah, good start. Kind of a version of that, B option. But then this student doesn't stop here, right? They go a little bit deeper. I'm particularly excited about Professor Mehran Sahami's course. It's not a real professor, generated for the purposes of this example. Course on ethical and social issues in computing, where I can explore the ethical challenges of AI and algorithmic bias. So now, okay, wow. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty and the details. Like now we're talking about not just a professor, but a course that this professor is teaching, and also what the student finds interesting about it, right? Now we're starting to get to the point of like, hey, yes, other, schools have engineering schools, but no other school likely has this professor with this particular combination of experience teaching this course. So now we're getting to something that is truly unique about Stanford that the student is pointing to. But we don't just leave it there. The student goes even further here. His commitment to using technology for positive societal impact aligns with my goal of building tools that makes a difference in people's lives. So this is a great, summing everything up in terms of, and in fact, I would even argue you can drill even deeper here. You could say what type of positive societal impact, right? You could say like, Professor Zahami had a research project in the past where it resulted in this type of change in terms of the local Palo Alto community, and I really admired that because of this. So I would argue, like, even for this example, there's an opportunity to dig even deeper, because positive societal impact, that's great. That's a good step in that direction, but it's still like, it could be said more broadly. So it could be more specific. Okay, so far we've talked about kind of the introspection, showing versus telling, talked about school research. And then finally, this third component is what I call the so what. So how does your personal story relate to who you will be at a Stanford or at a Cornell, et cetera? And what this looks like is combining your reflections with, connecting your specific reflections with the opportunities found at this school. And as I mentioned, it's because admissions officers are trying to assess your potential. They're not just thinking about who you are right now. They're thinking about what kind of student you're going to be for them a year down the line when you show up as a freshman, but also who are you going to be 4 years from now, right? Is this someone that we, because once you're a student, you're going to be, in the classroom, you're going to be impacting your classmates. There's this like cross contamination of like learning and not contamination, pollination, cross pollination of learning. So they're trying to assess your potential really based off, again, as I mentioned, your character, your interests, and the trajectory that you're on. And so you want to make their job as easy as possible and be as specific as describing your trajectory. You don't want them to guess. If it's not stated in your application how you expect to grow, they unfortunately they have to assume that, hey, you're not going to grow, or they're not going to make that assumption for you. They're going to be like, okay, well, we have to evaluate this application as is. We can't fill in the blanks for you. So what does this look like? Now we're talking about Harvard. Example A. I'm interested in joining Harvard's chess club because of my experience as captain at my high school chess club, and I look forward to competing against even stronger opponents. So this is fine. This is okay, right? Like I think for a lot of us, it is logical and maybe even expected. If you do something in high school, then yeah, you'll probably do something similar or do the same thing once you're in college. And that's okay, right? But in order to really stand out and kind of show that you've done the work, show that there's a deeper meaning, the deeper so what behind what you do, we'll show in this like second example. So breaking it down into different pieces, reading it through. In my hometown, I often felt isolated in my love for chess. So I founded my high school's chess club to build a community for others like me. So now you're seeing a little bit of this like personal story, right? It's not that this person just joined the chess club or just did chess. There's a reason for it. They wanted to build a community. There wasn't a community for chess, so they decided to start it for themselves. So as I coached new players, I discovered the joy of creating a space where passion could grow. Yet with few seasoned players around, my progress has plateaued. You can see that it was challenging. There were rough patches, and it was tough for them to really improve as a player. It was tough for them to recruit. So then now we're starting to, that was the first part in terms of the personal story. Now we're talking about the Harvard connection. So you can see here, Harvard's commitment to outreach in its vibrant Boston chess scene with grandmasters and lifelong players offers the challenge and inspiration I need. So for this student, they did the research and they looked into Harvard's chess club. And, one of the things that they found is that Harvard does a ton of outreach with local schools and partnerships, and even just in local communities, and hosting open chess nights and playing with members of the community. So in that, the student was very excited at the chance of playing with so many different other players. So that's kind of what they're drawing on in this example. And then finally, by joining this community, I hope to not only advance my skills, but also give back through Harvard's outreach programs, bringing my journey full circle. So with this, again, this idea of tying it back. So for me as an admissions officer for Harvard, I see this and it makes sense. It makes logical sense to me. I can see that community is a big motivator for this student. At the beginning, you didn't have a chess community, so you created one for yourself. And then now you're coming into an environment, you see that there is this awesome chess community, and you're really excited by that, right? Like instead of having to be someone who has to build it from the ground up, now you get to join an established organization, you get to join an established network, and you find that extremely exciting. And I get it. So it makes sense to me as a reader. So I know that was a lot, and I think now I'd like to do something to sort of bring it all together and show you an actual why us essay example from someone I've worked with in the past. So this is an example essay from for Cornell, and made a couple comments on the side that I'll just talk through. But reading through the prompt, it's for again, as I mentioned, it's for Cornell and specifically the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management. And the prompt is: the Dyson School is unique by design. What motivates you to apply to Dyson, and where do you plan to go from here? That's actually, it's very, very direct and very much touches on the things that we've talked about, right? Like, why are you interested, and what do you plan to do once you're here? So the first comment I had is related to, I'll just leave this up. So the first comment I had is related to the unique to Cornell and not just any school. The student writes, I believe Dyson complements my career and academic goals because even though other colleges offer economics and business major, remember, like I said, that most colleges have most majors, I've yet to find a program that seamlessly combines economics with environmental science like Cornell. So now, for me as a reader, I know, okay, yeah, it's clear that you have something specific that you're looking at, and you're not just applying because, oh, you're applying because econ is, what you feel like you should do. It's you're not just say like, I'm just applying in econ and want to go to business because that's like where the money is. No, you're actually coming at it from a very like specific angle. And you see that we offer something here at Cornell that is a little different. And then the next comment I have here is related to this. I believe my skills complement both colleges, especially as a person with diverse experiences in the business and agricultural field. I am interested in hybridizing both subjects because mitigating climate change from a business standpoint is an unconventional yet promising approach. So what I love here is this specific intention. I'm not just doing this because it seems interesting, it's cool. I have a goal, and my goal is I have this background in like agriculture and background in business, and I'm interested in bringing those two together, which is a unique opportunity that I'd have at Cornell. So this next paragraph here, I know I highlighted most of it, and maybe you can just quickly read through it on your own time. What I really like is that it shows the growth and change from the beginning of when the business is founded to the end. And specifically, I said I first discovered an influential business and started this online Etsy shop. And then prior to that, I was simply documenting my artistic journey on social media. So before it became a business, it was literally just, I was just documenting it for fun and sharing it online. And then you can read, so throughout this business, and then soon towards the end, I was updating over 20,000 followers on Instagram about my newest creation ideas. Here I am, 60 sales and $1,600 later. And I gained confidence in my abilities and invested my heart and mind into customer conversations to turn their dream into a reality. So you can see at the beginning, they're just starting it out as a hobby. It was just fun. But now it's not only is there the impact, right? The customers and the revenue, but it's more the personal impact. They gain confidence. They were able to work with customers and invest their heart into this like passion project and turn the customer's dreams into reality. So you see this journey and this like character growth for the student. Next is when you look further on, highlight this part here is I am particularly interested in Professor John Tobin de la Puente's mission to bring about positive environmental change through private investment. And not only that, the student mentions this specific org that this professor co-founded and what it does. So now, again, just like the Stanford example, we're talking about a professor that works at Cornell and has a very special area of expertise. So for an admissions officer, this signals to them, hey, the student has done the research and is not just speaking generally. They're actually talking about something that is very specific to Cornell. Um, and here's an area of improvement that I would point out, and maybe an opportunity of growth to even elevate this essay further. So in this paragraph, the student talks about their appreciation for environmental science and kind of in relation to their work at UC Davis in the past. Um, so I think the placement is a little random. It doesn't maybe connect quite as well with the previous and previous paragraph. But also because this essay is about kind of this intersection of business and environmental science. And so I think there's an opportunity to expand on this part, because this essentially is the environmental portion of the essay. But compared to the essay as a whole, it's just, smaller. It's not highlighted quite as much. So I would have if we could workshop this essay again, I probably would have advocated for developing this a little bit more, so it's a little bit more balanced, the business side and the environmental science side. So it just goes to show, even a great essay, even a great successful essay that gets students into Cornell can always be better. And finally, again, this theme of bringing the story back full circle. So highlighting here, in conjunction with knowledge from the Dyson School of Business and guidance from faculty members like Professor, I would be able to market potential plastic alternatives to be appealing and economically sustainable for companies to universally adopt. So again, just reminding the admissions officer, what's the main point, right? Reminding me that this student cares not just about business, not just about environmentalism, but both, and feels that there is a way to incentivize companies to care about both in the same way that she does. So for me, that really hammers home this point, especially at the end of this essay, when I'm kind of like, okay, like trying to figure out what's the takeaway here. The student says it, so it's very explicit, and it's almost like, hey, yeah, no, that makes sense. You're making my job very easy, and it's a nice refresher. So that is this example why us essay, what it can look like. But again, this is not to say that this is the only way, or this is necessarily that you have to do it this way. This is just an example of what such an essay can look like when there is this deep level introspection and tying it back to the student's background. So that concludes the formal portion of our workshop. At this time, I'd love to invite you to share questions in the chat, and we'll go through as many as we can in the remaining 14 minutes or so. In the meantime, I'd love to share that for not just seniors that might be applying this year, but for sophomores or juniors that just have college application questions, or maybe want a second opinion on whatever it is that you're working on. I offer free hour consultations. Just go ahead and email. It's feiyang@yourepic.consulting. And this is going to be just an awesome opportunity for both students or parents, or both, to share your story, share about what it is that you're maybe most anxious about or worried about, and we can talk through where I've seen that in terms of students I've worked with, or maybe my experience working at UC Berkeley, and just provide a safe space and an opportunity to share my areas of expertise with you all. And yeah, I'm starting to see some questions come in. So I see one question: are the UC essay requirements different from other colleges? We heard that the UC essay should be more fact-based and less style-oriented. Yeah, so good Good question. Dan, Dan Michael's mom. Um, so yeah, yes and no. A lot of the what you might be hearing about the more fact-based is more out of necessity because the UC, they're called essays, but they're more it's called personal insight questions. They're just shorter in terms of word count. You have compared to the personal statement, you only have 350 words versus 650. So naturally, you're just gonna have less space, right? You're gonna have to cut to the chase a little bit faster. So you may not have, a free paragraph to really paint this picture in this setting as much as you maybe want. So for that, yeah, I do encourage students to cut to the chase, right? You aren't going to be able to use as many flowery details. So in that sense, you're really gonna have to prioritize. Hey, does this detail actually matter, right? Like, does the reader really need to know that, for me, like my first job when I was driving all the time, do they really need to know that my car was blue? Well, no, probably not, right? They just need to know what you were doing and what was challenging about it. The most important part is that, hey, if you were commuting all the time for your first job and it was very difficult, that's all they need to know. They don't need to know the car, you know? Um, so Whereas compared to the personal statement, 650 words, yeah, you have more space and it allows you to be a little bit more creative, a little bit more holistic. You're talking more about the whole journey rather than just say like, rather than sticking more to the facts or more to the like relevant facts. For example, I have a student right now. She's working on her University of Michigan essay, and she likes movies a lot. So stylistically, she's been playing around with having kind of like this movie dialogue or this like movie script, which yeah, it's cool. And even she with the person or with the personal statement or the Michigan community essay, like she still struggles with um the word count and having to prioritize, okay, like where do I cut? Like is this dialogue too long? What lines are actually necessary for the essay. So all that is to say, there's always going to be a trade-off. There's always going to be things you leave, things you cut. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Yes, Carrie.
Hi, thanks for taking the time to put this together. Um, I I think what makes me really interested to hear your insights is like how you have worked as an admissions counselor, I believe.
Yeah.
And like that really makes me nervous because all students are like probably a little terrified of like just knowing that someone's assessing their application and like imagining how they're going to be as a student.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of students are just, they feel like they're never going to be able to, like, the whole application is just how they look on paper and it's
Mhm.
not how they're going to feel on campus. So,
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
do you feel like, what do you think allows you to predict how a student is going to perform on campus from their application? And do you really feel like you can like predict that? Like, and are there any warning signs you see just from people's applications? Just from your like experience as an admissions counselor?
Yeah. No, that's a really great question. And can I just ask, are you asking for as a from like the student perspective or maybe from like the parent perspective?
Well, I'm not a parent. I I actually well, okay, so I don't know if I should be here because I've already applied to college. But I'm thinking about applying to grad school actually.
Oh,
But just, like I I think what really spoke to me was how you said like the college pleasing kind of habit kind of stick with you even after you got in.
Yep.
And you just kept in mind how like the process of how you got in like made you want to continue college pleasing even when you were in
Yeah.
college.
Yeah.
So like yeah, I mean like I really liked how the essay example had the example the anecdote about the Etsy shop. I feel like that seems kind of realistic. I mean, it seems like that, you know, the person really did grow from that experience. So like I personally struggled with like when I wrote my essay for college applications, I sent it to a college coach. It got reviewed and I just picked the essay that had the best feedback
Mm.
and I was like, okay, this one looks like it's the most promising. And I'm like, it I guess it worked. But I
Yeah.
don't know if like sometimes it's really hard to even reverse and think back like maybe how you could have done it better because I was kind of like okay this looks like it might work
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't even know if it really speaks to who I am now, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
like so like how do you make your essay feel like it's not just, you know, like a product kind of like meant to be your like mask that you present to the
Yeah.
college?
Yeah. No, that's a it's the million dollar question, right? And honestly, I'm very, you know, even with my story and working with students, like I'm very open in relating with students and saying, hey, a lot of these questions that you're struggling with, like it's okay to not feel like 100% about them right now, right? Like these are questions that I am, you know, grappled with when I applied to grad school. And frankly, I have peers who are, you know, in their 30s. They're still grappling with it. You know, who am I? What do I want? Right? What's authentic to me? What's maybe, you know, a product of, say, those around me or maybe like family expectations. Um, and in fact, I have a student right now, you know, she's um, you know, I think her entire life she's wanted to go pre-med but I think lately she's been, you know, like, hey, is this what I want? You know, do I want it for authentic reasons or is it, you know, family influenced? And I'm straight up like, obviously, as we dig deeper, I encourage her to talk about that and be real and say, hey, like I'm drawn to medicine because, for example, you know, I want to help people and I've had these formative experiences that have, you know, helped people through this like, you know, blood clinic and it felt really good and I really liked that. But at the same time, I am concerned that this small percentage of my introduction to like medicine that isn't the whole picture, right? And there's more. It's like a glacier, or it's like a I see the 20% poking out of the water, but then there's this 80% of, you know, I don't know if you have doctors in this meeting, but I'm sure the doctors out there know that helping people isn't all of the job, right? There's so much else that comes with that. And I encourage my student to just lean into that and be like, hey, that 80% that I'm not fully aware of, you know, that gives me pause, but this is what I'm planning to do to try to gain more certainty one way or another. And for us as an admissions officer, like that is so refreshing and so real that in itself, a student that is courageous enough, and I guess my students are fortunate enough to be working with me, so I can kind of call out like, hey, I'm be honest, like it kind of feels like you're college pleasing, and 9 times out of 10 they'll be like, yeah, I think I'm college pleasing. And I'm like, okay, well, as long as you know, and you know, let's how can we inject a little bit more like authenticity and we'll like talk it out. And so for her, for this student, for a lot of students, they're like, yeah, I know kind of like how I feel, but is that going to make me look weak, right? Is that going to make me look uncertain? And I kind of remind them, dude, you're 16, you're 17. It's okay to be uncertain. In fact, like if you were 16 and you were just full speed ahead, this is I want to be a doctor and you know nothing could persuade me otherwise. I would actually be a little bit more concerned. I'd be like, hey, you know, there's a big world out there. And you mentioned something really interesting earlier about, admissions officers predicting potential and predicting who a student is going to be. And I love that I'm not associated with any school, so I can say this more openly. It is very inexact. And admissions officers, like we don't always get it right. It is very much imperfect. And I use the UCs as an example, right? Like, for UC admissions, they don't rely on standardized testing in terms of like the SAT, ACT anymore. And in my view, it makes admissions officers' jobs harder. It removes one data point, it removes one additional opportunity for the student to demonstrate, academic academic aptitude. So for once you remove that, everything else gets further under the magnifying glass, and because of that, it leads more, it injects more subjectivity. The essays, the activities list, et cetera, et cetera. So it is very hard, and just for any consolation for any students or parents out there, like admissions officers, like they evaluate, but it's not they're not God. Apologies to anyone who's religious out there. They're not, they don't get it right 100% of the time. They just evaluate based off what they see in front of them. And so the best thing, or the thing that students have most in their control, is to put forth, their full, as much as possible, their authentic selves, so that if and when they are admitted, waitlisted, rejected, they at least know, hey, like I got this result because of me, not because I was trying to fit someone else's mold, not because I was trying to be something that I'm not. Sometimes it's a complicated and unpleasant feeling to feel like you succeeded, but you fit some other box in order to succeed, right? And I think like some of that starts to venture into the imposter syndrome um, territory, where you're like, I got the success, I should be happy, but why am I not? Which I know a lot of, I think, college students feel at some point or another.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, I know it's three, but if next few seconds, if someone has like an extra question, I'm more than happy to um, answer one more for the road.
Do you only offer the essay consultation, or you also offer the whole, application process consultation?
Yeah. So great question. I offer both. So I if I can, I will leave a link in the chat. Let me see here. Okay, here, boom. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this in the chat, but um, we can talk about this more for anyone who would like consultation. But I offer, I can just show this here. So I have essay review plans specifically for, say, 11th, 12th graders who are applying in the near future. But I also have what are called package plans. So I have started with students as early as 8th grade, but also students starting in, say, 11th or 12th. So feel free to, for those interested, book a consultation, and we can talk more about what that looks like given your individual needs and situation, and what might be the best fit. Yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see one more question. What kind of in-school and out-school activities are more beneficial to application than any activity? I think that this question might be a little more nuanced. So, and Dongli, if feel free if you'd like to book a consultation. It really depends. It wouldn't be a black and white answer I could really answer on the spot. A lot of my approach is I'm a big believer in while I know kind of achievement culture has, students and parents constantly feeling like, oh, whatever they do, it's not enough. There's always more to do. There's always more. I really believe in enhancing what the student already has, enhancing, what are your strengths? What do you feel most confident in? Okay, let's build on that. Let's do more. Let's enhance that strength, whatever that is. And then design activities or design like projects or design a story out of that. So you can, in terms of story, yeah, you can tell a story for anything, but just because you can tell a story doesn't mean it's the best story, doesn't mean it's frankly, a distinct or interesting story. I use this example because I know there's a lot of, either Asian Americans or Asian parents in the chat, like, or in this call. So tell me if this sounds familiar. I call it the quote unquote Asian American story. So kind of growing up, like, my parents are from China or from Korea or from, any Asian country, essentially. And then growing up, I know that they had this background, and I grew up in America, so I didn't really understand it. So through some combination of like, oh, I visited my relatives in Asia, or through the food that my parents made, or through Chinese school in the States, I learned to like communicate and to understand my culture. And then now I realize that I'm bicultural, or I'm Asian American. This story has probably been told as often as time itself. In any given year, you as an admissions officer, you probably read at least 2,000 individually, like, yeah, like maybe like 1,000 to 2,000 of this like version, or some slight variation of this essay. So knowing that, and I think honestly, the first part is sort of knowing that, hey, this is like a reality. So like, if you want to tell this Asian American story, which I think a lot of us do, and a lot of us is culture is very important to us, we got to dig deeper, and we got to think, hey, like, if I go to Chinese school, if my school has a bunch of Chinese American, we all bring food and we all bring home cooked meals. How is my experience different than theirs, right? Like, if I were to dig a little bit deeper, like, if some students are maybe really like proud, or like, oh, hey, this is awesome, I love my mom's like home cooked meal, like, maybe your feelings are a little more complicated, right? Like, maybe you downplay it a little bit, maybe you hide it. Okay, like, why do you hide it? Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper. Like, were there moments where you were hiding it less? What happened to kind of cause that shift? Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper. So it's not just about like the story, it's about what makes your story distinct than someone who may have a similar one. And I think a lot of us, and I was in this boat too, like, I wrote a very basic Asian American essay as well, because I thought that was just, I didn't have anything really special about me. But looking back, like, obviously I'm the first Asian American kind of talking about this, like, college pleasing, and calling it out, this concept. And every peer, every parent that I kind of talk to about this, like, they recognize that, like, oh my gosh, you're telling my story. I'm like, yeah, no, it's like, it's something very relatable, and the best stories do have that relatability as well. So for those out there, if you have more questions, yeah, Carrie.
Um, I resonated a lot with what you just said. I think like a big struggle for me when I was writing was I really did want to kind of work in Asian American identity somehow, but actually, like you said, like it is such a reality that
Mhm.
like you don't want to make like, make it seem like, like I'm applying here because my parents want me to go here, or like
Yeah.
because sometimes that really is what people are feeling.
Yep.
And like that aspect is something I actually still kind of struggle with. I like maybe I'm not mature enough, so I haven't grown past this, but like
Mhm.
I think if I'm really real with myself, like that destabilizes me a bit because I think um well, if I think back, like I wrote my college essay actually about being the only Chinese person in my Italian class.
Mm,
And I did study Italian in college,
yeah.
but now I'm at a point where I don't know if I want to go to like get a PhD in Italian. I
Mm,
just feel like realistically that really is does seem unpractical. Like my
mhm,
parents will think that's unpractical.
mhm,
And but I kind of did work like make that sort of my angle for that, I don't know, sort of my personal life journey thing as my college essay.
yeah.
Um, and it was realistic enough where I feel like it was kind of truthful when I like minored in Italian in college.
Yeah.
Um, but like now I'm just kind of like going up against the same hurdle of just what really motivates me now? Is
Mm,
it just trying to be different, or is it just because again, like I am, I do still have to deal with the financial cost of college and like just those practical questions.
yeah.
Um, so like I don't want to like I'm like scared that anxiety is going to show. Like I'm scared that's going to like come through and
Yeah.
put people off,
Mhm,
and actually decrease my chance of getting what I want in terms of
yeah.
college.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I feel you, right? Like I definitely was in that space as well. Like um if I would love to have a follow-up conversation, chat more about this, in the future. But when I applied to grad school, I had those same like, same, I guess, worries and anxieties, especially as, I struggled a lot at UCLA. I was on academic probation and, feeling super lost. And I was like, what grad school is gonna like want me? Like I never thought I would go to like grad school. And in fact, like, there's a story for another time, but me applying to grad school was actually my way of um, feeling, feeling like I had achieved enough for, say, like my family or my partner at the time, feeling like I had accomplished enough to be, worth something in their eyes. Um, and I know it's incredibly difficult in the moment, but in retrospect, looking back, like including those worries or that like quote unquote like weakness or vulnerability like in those essays and talking about like, hey, like at one point I didn't think I was meant for grad school. Like I was like, what grad school is going to want me? Like why would they admit someone who was on active probation like multiple times? um but similar to my business, like I realized that a lot of these struggles in school actually like was very beneficial for me in my master in education program, where I actually do resonate with the students that are like forgotten, and that schools like a UCLA or UC Berkeley, frankly these UC factories that have thousands and thousands of students, where like every student is frankly hot take, but the students are just a number. We're like, hey, we don't really care if you drop out. We're going to have another student replace you like immediately. So in my grad school program and in the way I talked about my essays, I said that my struggles actually made me more student oriented and made me be like helped me relate to the student that might be forgotten, and helps me relate to students that might just be a number. And I think we can talk more about this offline, but I think maybe there is some element of like being different or being someone who offers a unique perspective that like the overall like majority of your class or majority of your like peers may not have. I think that does have some significance with you, and that's okay and that's cool. Everyone to a certain extent wants to be a little different. No one wants to be like, just one of many. No one wants to be like, generic or basic. So, yeah, would love to have another conversation about this. And if you're still kind of like figuring this out and figuring out what your story is, and like that's natural. I don't know how old or young you are, but honestly, like I think like this is something that people in their 30s or even 40s, right, like are still figuring out. So, yeah, you're exactly where you should be. Cool. So, man, ran a little over time, but happy to stay on because feel like just had a lot of great questions, great engagement today, more than I'm used to for a webinar with mostly Asian students and parents. So thankful for that. Honestly, it's the way I prefer it. But thank you all so much for taking time out of your Sunday afternoons, whatever you could be doing. Glad you spent part of it with me. You have my contact. Feel free to reach out with any questions, and again, offer free consultations just to, provide information, provide insights. Thank you again, and hope to see you all soon at either one-on-one meeting or future webinars. I'm sure you'll everyone who's registered or attended tonight's event will be notified about future events. So take care and have a great rest of your day.